Hey friends, welcome back to Acre Homestead. My name is Becky and today we are standing in my walk-in pantry in front of quite a few of my home canned items. And what I wanted to talk to you about today is what should you be doing right now in order to prepare for the craziness of harvest season. Now, this is a great conversation to have whether you have a large garden or you live in an apartment, because you can start preserving your own food regardless of where you live. And that's what I did. I took that time when I lived in the suburbs to learn the food preservation skills so that when I moved on to where I live now and I garden, I can focus on learning those skills and I don't have to worry about the home preservation skills, because they're two different skills. Gardening, food preservation are two different skills. And when that harvest comes in, you're going to be busy. And whether you're buying the food from a local farmer's market, you're going to a U-Pick, or you know farmers in your area, or you know friends and family that garden that have an overabundance and they're willing to share it with you, there are things that you can do right now in order to prepare to make that season of harvest that much easier, because when that abundance comes in, you can go straight into food preservation mode and you don't have to worry about trying to accumulate the items you need in order to preserve that food. We have some exciting news. I am starting a newsletter, so if you want to join that, the newsletter will be linked down in the description box, and the first letter that you're going to be getting is a written list of all the food preservation items we talk about today, so you don't have to worry about writing anything down. After the video, you sign up for the newsletter, you will be getting an email that has a written list for you, so you can just start checking those things off the list. Let's talk about the first thing and the most obvious thing, because we were just standing in front of a bunch of canned goods, and that is your canner. That is the foundation of canning. There's two different main types of canning, and we could do an entire video on this topic in and of itself. There's water bath canning and there's pressure canning. Water bath canning is the type of canning you do for acidic foods, mostly fruits, juices, things like that, tomatoes, applesauce, jams and jellies. Things that are acidic can be water bath canned. Pickles and things that are non-acidic like beans, meat, broth need to be pressure canned, because in order to make them safe, they need to be canned at a higher temperature than boiling. And the way you get a higher temperature than boiling is you pressure can them. You have the choice of buying a pressure canner or a water bath canner. And both of these canners right here actually are pressure canners. And what my recommendation would be is to go with a pressure canner, because you can water bath can and or pressure can in a pressure canner. I have a 23-quart Presto pressure canner. This is the only pressure canner that I know that you can can on a glass stove, and it is the most affordable pressure canner. So this is the one that I will have linked down in the description box. The cool thing about this is if you are scared to pressure can right now, you can still water bath in this. Water bath canners have gotten quite expensive over the last 2 years, and they're running you about half of what it costs to buy a pressure canner. So if you can do it, I would highly recommend you go ahead and invest in a pressure canner. Now this over here is an electric pressure canner. This is the Presto 12-quart pressure canner. I love this pressure canner because if you are nervous about pressure canning, you do not have to watch this at all. This one you do have to keep a closer eye on. This one you click the button, you turn it on, and you let it do its thing. Now after you get your canner, the most important thing you get after that is a book that you trust, a trusted resource that you can get the recipes from. Canning is a science. It is not something that you can just make up your own recipes. And so get yourself a book that you trust. This is my favorite canning book. This is the canning book my mom bought me when I started canning about 7 years ago, and it's the only one I have. It's the Complete Book of Home Preservation, and I use this every single year, multiple years. The other two things I use a lot of are the actual manuals that come with my canners. They have the foundation and the guidelines that are just really simple. So if you need to know quickly how to can broth, how to can beans, I use my manuals for my pressure canners all the time. Another really good resource is the National Home Preservation website. I can link that website down below, because if you have any questions about what your elevation is and what you should be pressure canning or water bath canning times and things and questions, can you substitute certain things, can you not? That is the website you want to refer to, because they're the ones that do all the testing. And if you have any questions on like something you have canned yourself, another good thing is to call your local extension office. If you have a question on whether you did something right or wrong, they're the ones that are going to be able to help you answer those questions. Now that we have our canner and our resource on how to can, we need to start looking into the equipment we need in order to do that actual canning. A couple things that are going to make your life so much easier in the canning process are a stainless steel funnel. This is going to keep the rims of your jars a lot cleaner if you use this, trust me. The next thing you're going to want are some canning tongs. These tongs allow you to pull out your hot jars from your canner. And these, if I can't find these, I'm in a world of hurt. This is a magnet wand, and so if you have your lids in hot water, you can use this magnet to pull the lids out and you don't have to stick your hands in the hot water. Now, of course, one of the obvious things we need are some canning jars. I buy the majority of my canning jars from my local thrift store, and I've heard you can get them at garage sales. I don't tend to go to garage sales very much, but that's another good resource. They are perfectly okay to use used as long as you feel around the rim and you make sure there's no nicks or dings or anything in them. And I just take a close look at them and make sure there's no cracks or anything. But at my local Goodwill, they are 49 cents a jar. And so what I do is I let my family and friends know that they're ever at a thrift store and they see some jars, I will take them. I'll buy them from them if they buy them from me for me at the thrift store. So that's what I like to do, is I like to get my jars at the local Goodwill. Probably one of the most important things that comes along with canning are lids. Lids are technically only supposed to be used one time. And if you guys remember back in 2020 and 2021, lids were extremely hard to come by. There was almost a year and a half where 90% of the time if you went to the store, there were no canning lids. And I now thankfully have a good stockpile because canning lid prices have skyrocketed. They are almost not even affordable in my local grocery store anymore to buy the name brand Ball or Kerr jars. They are about 70 cents a lid for a wide mouth jar. I can buy a can of beans for 70 cents on sale in my local grocery store. So it's hard to justify putting in the time and effort in canning if your equipment is so expensive. So this last year I found some new lids. These are much more affordable and they are a better quality lid. I can link them with a discount code down in the description box. They are a family-owned business. I stand behind their company and I've been using these lids for the last year, and you can buy them in these huge sleeves and they are way more affordable, and bonus, they're better quality than the Ball and Kerr. I haven't had one lid failure when it comes to these canning lids. My personal goal is to always be at least 1, if not 2 years ahead of canning lids because of that 2020 and 2021 craziness where I could not find lids. And so I have really stocked up and now I am set on lids. So the reason you can water bath can things is because they are acidic, and there are a couple different acidic mediums you can use in canning. There's vinegar, so I always keep at least 2, if not 3 gallons of both apple cider vinegar and white distilled vinegar. Now when you're canning with vinegar, they have to be at least 5% acidity. That acidity was what all the tests were done to make sure that the canning items were safe in the testing process. The majority of all the vinegar you buy that's distilled is going to be that 5% acidity, but it's just something to note that when you're buying vinegar to can in, you need to make sure it says 5% acidity on the bottle, at least somewhere. You can also use bottled lemon juice, not fresh lemon juice, to get that acidity in some items, and or citric acid. This is my favorite lemon juice to can with because it gives a really good flavor. It's 100% lemons. The lemon juice that's in that green bottle, the majority of what's in that green bottle is not lemons that make it acidic, it's citric acid. And citric acid is totally fine to can with, but I don't prefer the flavor that citric acid gives. I think it's a little too acidic and I just don't like it. But I know, and I have friends that can, and they prefer citric acid as opposed to lemon juice, and it really does depend on what you're canning, whether you want one flavor or the other. So these types of things, deciding whether you want to use citric acid or lemon juice, are just things that are personal preference. And the recipe usually gives you an option to use one or the other. And you're not going to really know that until you start canning and you start doing taste tests and things. And then you're going to find what you and your family likes the best. Because that's why we do this, is so that we can have food that is preserved at the height of ripeness. So you want to make sure you're getting the flavor that you really, really like. My goal in canning is to have a superior product than something I could buy canned at the grocery store. And so that is why I do put a lot of effort into trying to figure out what tastes the best and what is our favorite recipes for Josh and I, because why would I go through all this work if I could buy something that tastes better at the grocery store? The next thing you're going to need for canning is salt. Now, salt does not preserve the food. It's not what keeps it safe to eat in the jar, but it's what adds flavor. And you ideally want it to be non-iodized. Now, when it comes to salt, you can buy pickling salt or canning salt. All that means is that salt that doesn't have iodine that's added to it. The reason they do that is because iodine and the levels that they add to salt can make your food discolor. It's not going to affect the quality, but it can make things turn brown over time, and that's not super appealing, having brown peaches sitting on your pantry shelf. So what I like to use personally, because those canning salts don't have any extra minerals in them at all, and they're stripped of anything that's good for you that is in salt, because salt is a natural thing that is really, really healthy for us when it's in its natural form, because it has, I think this salt has over 68 minerals. This is Redmond real salt that's mined in Utah, but the same could be said for pink Himalayan salt that's mined in Pakistan. I prefer to use the stuff that's mined from Utah because it's mined in the US, it's packaged in the US, and I know how the practices from out of the ground into the package, I know how the workers were treated, and it's a really good work environment. I don't necessarily trust the stuff that comes from overseas. This does have iodine in it along with pink Himalayan salt, but it has a natural level of iodine plus all the extra trace minerals that are left in it, and it's not going to affect the color of your canned goods because it doesn't have an excess amount of iodine in it. Now, if you want to make jams and jellies, you need pectin. This is my favorite pectin because it's a low sugar pectin. I have not used Pomona's pectin, but that is on my list of something to use this year. So I have a bunch of these in my pantry because if I'm going to make jam, I want to be able to make jam whenever I want to make jam. This is the regular pectin that uses quite a bit more sugar. I do have some of these, but I rarely use them. And then I do just have loose pectin here. And I like to keep these all on hand for whenever I want to start canning. Now, sugar. If you're going to make jams and jellies, you need a lot of sugar. A lot of pickle recipes call for sugar, so I keep a lot of sugar on hand. I buy my sugar in 50-pound bags so that I will never run out of sugar. So those are the items you need in order to do canning. Let's talk about some other items that you can have and equipment you can have to do food preservation in other methods. Canning is one of my favorites, but it's not my favorite for everything. I have definitely learned over the years that some things I prefer canned, some things I prefer frozen, some things I prefer dehydrated, and some things I now prefer freeze-dried. So let's talk about some of those other food preservation items you can have on hand so that you have multiple different ways to preserve food. This is a food saver. This is to vacuum seal things for the freezer. I really enjoyed having this last year. This is actually my sister-in-law's that I borrowed that I'm going to bring to her this weekend, so I got to get my own. But I definitely could tell a difference using this as opposed to Ziploc bags. The first couple of years I was doing food preservation, I didn't have the ability to use a food saver, so I used all Ziploc bags. And I can tell that the quality of food preservation is better in a food saver. All that to say, I do have Ziploc bags and I will use these to do some food preservation in. So I did stock up on these because they were on sale at Costco last time I was there, and I will be using both again this next year. This next food preservation item is a food dehydrator. This is an Excalibur dehydrator, and I've had this for 3 years now. Now this is a premium dehydrator. There's a couple things that make this dehydrator a little bit more of a premium product than, say, the Nesco, the round dehydrators that are kind of more the typical dehydrators that come to mind when I first started thinking about getting a dehydrator. That was the kind that came to mind. The reason why I prefer the Excalibur style dehydrators as opposed to the other style is the heating element for this dehydrator is in the back of the unit, and the fan pushes forward. And so when you have your food in your trays, then you do not have to rotate anything because it's even heat throughout that entire dehydrator, as opposed to the round ones. The heating element is either usually on the bottom or it's on the top of the dehydrator. And if you have 8 trays, the top or the bottom, wherever that heating element is going to dehydrate much, much quicker than whatever the other end is. So what you have to do is you need to check on it and go through and rotate it. During harvest season, I am so busy and time is of the essence. I don't have time to babysit my dehydrator, and that is why I decided to wait and save and invest in an Excalibur. I now have 2 Excaliburs. This is a 5 tray and I have a 9 tray. I purchased this 5 tray on Facebook Marketplace, and then my husband for my birthday last year got me the 9 tray. And if you are going to invest in an Excalibur dehydrator, I would highly recommend you not go with the 5 tray, go with the 9 tray, because you are going to quickly run out of space with a 5 tray. And so I would just go big. Whether you find it Facebook Marketplace, I will link it for you so you can see it down in the description box. But I would highly, highly, highly recommend you go with the bigger one, because once you start dehydrating, just like canning, you're going to become addicted to it and you're not going to have enough space in a 5 tray. Now let's talk about freeze drying as a way of food preservation. This is the newest technology when it comes to food preservation. As opposed to a dehydrator uses heat to evaporate moisture from food, and that's what keeps it shelf stable once it's dehydrated. As opposed to how a freeze dryer works. What a freeze dryer does is it freezes the food well below freezing. It's in a vacuum, and as it brings that temperature of the food back up, when that water goes from a frozen state to a gaseous state, it vacuums out that moisture. The moisture gets stuck on the side of the panels and it freezes it, and it keeps your food fresh because there is then no moisture left in the food because it has vacuumed it out of the food. The reason this technology was invented was in World War II in order to transport medicines and blood and platelets in order to help soldiers in the war. And then they used it for things like astronauts. Now this again could be its own video, and it's going to be one of my next videos, the difference between freeze drying and dehydrating and what it does to the end product of the food. But the thing that's different about a freeze dryer is it doesn't cook the food, as opposed to a dehydrator cooks the food slightly. What goes in the freeze dryer comes out of the freeze dryer the same. It's just freeze dried once you go to reconstitute it. If you put in raw chicken in here, you take it out and you reconstitute it, you have raw chicken, as opposed to dehydrating. If you dehydrate raw meat, it's going to be cooked and then it turns into jerky. That's basically what jerky is this dehydrated meat. Instead of in a freeze dryer, it's going to come out raw again. And the cool thing about a freeze dryer is it has a lot more potential to preserve food than just single items. You can preserve whole meals in a freeze dryer. You can preserve so many different things. I hope this video was helpful and encouraging and empowering, as opposed to overwhelming. The last thing I want this to be is overwhelming for you. This seems like a lot of stuff, but right now is the perfect time to just start slowly building and accumulating the things you need in order to make harvest season that much easier for you. Harvest is a crazy busy time of year. It's a fun time of year. It's a beautiful time of year. But if we can do things now to prepare and make it that much enjoyable for ourselves, that is something that I would like to encourage you to do, because some of these items can be a little bit scarce to find. So if you can find them, I'd recommend you snag them up. If you are overwhelmed and you've never canned or dehydrated or freeze dried or anything like that, I have tons of videos, and I can leave a food preservation playlist down in the description box, and I can leave some videos right here where you can go enjoy those. Don't forget that if you want to join Acre Homestead's Families newsletter, that link will be down in the description box. I can't wait to communicate in that way, in the written form. I hope that letter is going to be a resource for you. I want it to be educational. I want it to be fun and encouraging. It's not going to be spammy. You're going to get free recipes and all sorts of fun, interesting facts about food, food preservation, behind the scenes of stuff that I have going on around here, exclusive things that just you are going to know. So I can't wait to see you over there. If you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new, please consider subscribing. And don't forget, I will link some videos up here about food preservation so you can go enjoy those. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day, and I can't wait to see you guys next time. Bye guys.